The incident began at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris on a busy Friday afternoon, when Ronaldo and his longtime friend and business advisor were attempting to board a private flight to Madrid. What should have been a routine departure that took no more than 30 minutes from arrival to takeoff. But when they approached the security checkpoint reserved for private aviation passengers, the atmosphere changed immediately as airport security focused their attention not on Ronaldo, whose face was instantly recognizable and whose presence usually expedited official procedures, but on his companion, whose name was Youssef, and whose appearance and documentation seemed to trigger suspicions that transformed a standard security screening into an interrogation that revealed the systematic discrimination that many Muslim travelers faced, even when traveling with people whose celebrity status should have protected them from harassment. Youssef had been Ronaldo's financial advisor for 7 years, a brilliant economist who had helped structure some of the most complex endorsement deals in sports history, and whose investment strategies had generated hundreds of millions in returns. But his Lebanese passport and Islamic name appeared to override his professional credentials and personal relationship with one of the world's most famous athletes. As security personnel immediately separated him from Ronaldo and began subjecting him to additional screening procedures that were not being applied to other passengers, including invasive searches of his luggage, detailed questioning about his travel purposes, and demands for documentation that went far beyond standard requirements for private aviation passengers. The questioning that followed was both humiliating and revealing, with security officers asking Youssef to explain his relationship with Ronaldo as if it were suspicious that a Muslim man could have legitimate business connections with a global celebrity, demanding detailed explanations of their travel plans, as if visiting Madrid for business meetings required justification when the same trip would have been processed without questions if undertaken by someone whose appearance and name didn't trigger stereotypes about terrorism and security threats. And treating his financial documents and business credentials with skepticism that suggested they believed someone with his background couldn't possibly have achieved professional success through legitimate means. Ronaldo watched the interrogation with growing anger and disbelief, initially assuming that the extra security measures were routine procedures that would be completed quickly. But as the questioning continued and became increasingly hostile, he began to understand that his friend was being subjected to discrimination that had nothing to do with legitimate security concerns and everything to do with prejudice that treated all Muslim travelers as potential threats, regardless of their actual backgrounds, credentials, or the circumstances of their travel. And when one security officer made a comment about needing to be careful about these people and their connections to dangerous organizations, Ronaldo's patience reached its breaking point. The confrontation that followed was witnessed by dozens of other passengers and airport staff who had gathered to watch the unusual spectacle of a global superstar arguing with security personnel. But what they witnessed was not a celebrity tantrum about inconvenience, but a principled stand against discrimination that Ronaldo articulated with moral clarity that made everyone present understand they were witnessing something more significant than a travel delay, as he demanded to know what specific security concerns justified treating his business partner differently from other passengers, and why questions about terrorist connections were being asked of someone whose professional reputation and personal history could be easily verified through publicly available information. "This man has been my advisor for 7 years," Ronaldo said, his voice carrying across the security area as other travelers stopped to listen. "He has access to my financial accounts. He travels with me regularly. He has been investigated by governments and banks in multiple countries as part of standard due diligence for high-value transactions. And if you have security concerns about him, then you have security concerns about me, because we work together, travel together, and trust each other with sensitive information that would be valuable to anyone who actually posed security threats, rather than someone whose only crime is being Muslim in an airport where that apparently makes him automatically suspicious." The security supervisor who was called to handle the situation attempted to defend his staff's procedures by explaining that additional screening was sometimes necessary for passengers from certain countries or with certain names. But Ronaldo's response revealed that he understood exactly what was happening and was not willing to accept euphemisms that disguised discrimination as security protocols, pointing out that if Youssef's Lebanese passport was a security concern, then why had he been allowed to travel without problems for years until today? And if his religion was the issue, then the airport needed to acknowledge that they were profiling passengers based on their faith rather than their actual risk profiles or behavior. The argument that followed attracted the attention of airport management, who realized that a high-profile discrimination incident involving one of the world's most famous athletes could become a public relations disaster that would damage the airport's reputation and potentially result in legal action. But their attempts to resolve the situation quietly by expediting Youssef's clearance, while asking Ronaldo to keep the incident private, only angered him further, because he understood that solving individual cases of discrimination while ignoring systematic problems was worse than doing nothing, since it allowed discriminatory practices to continue while providing cover through the appearance of responsiveness to complaints. The media attention that followed began when other passengers started recording the confrontation on their phones and sharing footage that showed Ronaldo defending his Muslim friend against airport discrimination. And within hours, the incident had become international news that sparked broader conversations about profiling and discrimination in airport security, with civil rights organizations praising Ronaldo's intervention, while airport authorities faced pressure to explain why a respected businessman had been subjected to interrogation that seemed designed to humiliate rather than ensure safety. Youssef's response to the incident was characteristically dignified, expressing gratitude for Ronaldo's support, while acknowledging that his experience was not unique among Muslim travelers who regularly faced additional scrutiny that had nothing to do with legitimate security concerns and everything to do with stereotypes that treated their religion as evidence of dangerous sympathies. And he used the media attention generated by the incident to speak about the broader impact of profiling on Muslim professionals who were forced to accept discrimination as the price of international travel and business success. The legal action that followed was not aimed at financial compensation, but at forcing policy changes that would prevent similar discrimination against other travelers. With Ronaldo's legal team working with civil rights organizations to challenge profiling practices that violated anti-discrimination laws, while hiding behind security protocols that were applied selectively based on passengers' apparent religion, ethnicity, or country of origin, rather than objective risk assessments that could be justified through actual security evidence. The settlement that was eventually reached included not just an apology and financial compensation, but comprehensive retraining for airport security personnel, revised screening procedures that reduced opportunities for discriminatory treatment, and oversight mechanisms that would monitor profiling complaints and ensure that security measures were applied consistently, regardless of passengers' backgrounds, creating a model that was subsequently adopted by other airports facing similar discrimination complaints. The foundation that emerged from the incident focused on supporting Muslim travelers and other groups who faced systematic discrimination in transportation security, providing legal assistance for people who experienced profiling, advocacy for policy changes that would reduce discriminatory practices, and education programs that helped security personnel distinguish between legitimate security concerns and prejudice disguised as professional caution. And the Foundation's work helped reduce discriminatory incidents while improving actual security by encouraging focus on behavior and evidence rather than stereotypes and assumptions. The friendship between Ronaldo and Youssef was strengthened rather than strained by the incident, with Youssef later explaining that having someone with Ronaldo's influence willing to risk controversy and negative publicity to defend him had demonstrated the kind of loyalty and principle that went far beyond professional relationships. And their continued collaboration, became a symbol of how personal relationships could transcend cultural and religious differences, while challenging systematic barriers that prevented such relationships from developing in societies where discrimination created artificial divisions between people who shared common values and interests. The broader impact of the airport incident extended far beyond aviation security to influence how celebrities and public figures responded to discrimination against their friends and colleagues, with several high-profile cases of athletes and entertainers speaking out against profiling and prejudice that they witnessed firsthand, creating a trend toward using influence and platform to challenge discrimination rather than simply benefiting from privilege, while ignoring injustices that affected people without similar protection from public attention and media coverage. Years later, when airport profiling had decreased significantly due to policy changes, inspired partly by the publicity generated by Ronaldo's intervention, when Youssef had been recognized as one of the most successful financial advisors in international sports, when their business partnership had generated hundreds of millions in charitable donations and social impact investments, Ronaldo would reflect that defending his friend at the airport had been one of the easiest decisions of his career, because it represented the kind of basic human decency that should never require courage, but often did in societies where discrimination was tolerated, as long as it remained quiet and didn't inconvenience people with the power to challenge unjust treatment of others, who lacked similar protection from systematic prejudice that treated entire groups of people as automatically suspicious regardless of their individual characters, achievements, or contributions to society.